Hello, and welcome to Anime Audio Commentary. Today I'll be commenting on episode 5 of Chainsaw Man. If you'd like to watch along, then start watching now. So just to pick up from that little cliffhanger, it seems like Denji is finally going to get his reward. And I guess when you get down to it, this is like a really big climactic moment in his life. I do have to say, Power is just a goblin, I understand that this is a momentous moment, but, maybe it's a little bit less momentous than Denji had perhaps hoped it would be. Yeah, as it turns out, Power, she was just kind of lying about the whole thing, really, It's nowhere near as enticing as she made it out to be. I mean, I get the feeling that Denji is a firm believer that beggars can't be choosers, so he's still, taking his 3 wishes, as it were, but, I can't help but feel like this is probably a bit underwhelming for Denji. Yeah, I mean, he doesn't even know what to make of it, the poor guy. I like how conceited Power is. I'm sure the pleasure was all yours. Ha 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 ha. So now that we've gotten that sort of cliffhanger out of the way, it's rather unfortunate that Denji's still sort of suffering from the realization that what he imagined is nowhere near as good as the reality. Naturally, Power just doesn't really care about it, given that she is a fiend and is probably more concerned with committing acts of violence, but, poor Denji, he sort of built that up in his head. He was anticipating it, he assumed it would be momentous, and I mean, I guess it doesn't really help that Power was engaging in subterfuge. Man, the poor guy's really suffering. I mean, I guess it doesn't help that, he has to do paperwork as well. That never helps anything. Man, I feel like this has to be a sort of HR issue waiting to happen where you bring up something like this to the person who is ostensibly your boss. I mean, he's couching it in terms that makes it seem rather generic, but, If Makima asks for any more details and you spill the beans... Oh, here we go. He just goes right out and says it. Yeah, that's kind of a trip to HR, dude. So I feel like this is one of Makima's more devious moments. And I think it's pretty fair to say that it doesn't seem devious from the outset. But, I don't know, given that some stuff has already been cut out, some stuff that I think would indicate that she's a little bit more double-binding than she seems, This scene, rather than just kind of erotic, is rather like... I don't know. I would call it suspicious personally, but maybe that's not the right word. That it, she definitely knows what she's doing, and she's trying to maybe not take advantage of Denji, but she's definitely trying to, I don't know, influence him, I guess. I mean, Denji's not exactly an intellectual powerhouse, so it's certainly working. I mean, the poor guy doesn't really stand a chance. I seem to recall there being like an interview with the director where he was saying something to the effect of, we were going to try and tone down some of the reactions and facial expressions that aren't realistic, but, given this scene, and assuming I'm actually remembering that correctly, I feel like he's kind of full of it. So it seems like after that little episode, Makima has seen fit to give us a little bit of exposition. The Gun Devil popped up about a decade and a half ago, killed a bunch of people, and then it hasn't really been seen since. Given that devils gain power based on how much the thing they represent is feared, I think it's a pretty safe assumption that the Gun Devil's going to be pretty darn powerful. And that Makima seems to think Denji has what it takes to beat the Gun Devil, that's kind of something that strains credulity, because, I mean, sure, he did in fact beat the Bat Devil and all that, but not by much. And personally, if I were to compare the two, I think I would say a gun is probably a little bit scarier than a bat, if only because of what the two objects can do relative to each other. So I don't know. It really seems like Makima knows something that we don't know yet. Something that gives her confidence as to why Denji might be able to effect so favorable an outcome. Man, I feel like a lot of this exposition is sort of like ripped from the headlines. That, gun violence is sort of what spurred the Gun Devil on to become even more powerful. And then there's sort of like a terrorist attack, but it was just the Gun Devil. That little, I guess, news cast on the TV, that really made it seem like they were sort of dancing around 9/11 a little bit, like, oh, that was totally the terrorist attack, but it was really the Gun Devil. Now, this here is interesting because I don't think we really know who these characters are, and if I'm remembering correctly, because it has been a while since I've read part 1 of Chainsaw Man, this little bit of exposition here, these kids going outside to play, this is something that I don't believe is revealed until a little while later. So I'm wondering precisely why they've put it here. If there's some sort of hidden utility that they intend to employ here. So, I mean, I think it goes without saying that something is going to go horribly wrong here, because on the one hand, there's sort of juxtaposed Makima talking about the gun devil appearing, and then we sort of like cut to this, where it's just like a couple kids innocently playing outside. You know, surely nothing bad could happen, right? You know, it seems like these two brothers have a somewhat rocky relationship. You know, maybe rocky's not quite the right term, but it seems like that they're getting along together so well is a little unusual. So, naturally, nothing good can last forever. I find it interesting how the gun devil is almost sort of portrayed as this force of nature. I mean, it isn't. It's based off of a fear that's entirely man-made, but so far we haven't really seen it, you know. We've seen the effects of it, and sort of like the blast wave it causes, but we don't actually see the gun devil itself. I mean, it might have been that way in the manga too, and in fact, I think it was in a couple panels, but I guess seeing it in motion here was an interesting directorial choice. So, despite everything that we now know, Denji is just pretty confident, you know. He doesn't really seem to think any of this is going to be a big problem. Now, this is also interesting. So the gun devil sort of leaves behind pieces that sort of tend to attract each other. And they're sort of, they take the form of, like, fleshy bullets, but they look rather more metallic than I think they should. Because, you know, the idea was, like, they were, like, bits of its flesh that just happened to look like bullets. So we're also sort of becoming privy to the fact that if another devil has a piece of the gun devil, it becomes stronger, presumably just through, like, osmosis. Well, there we have it, you know, in a not particularly subtle fashion, we learn that Aki has, a bit of a personal connection with the gun devil, and that's why he's so dead set on killing devils. So, you know I had sort of, like, complained about pacing earlier, but I'm glad we finally made it this far, you know, because this seems like the start of the fight with the Eternity Devil, and I have to say that's one of my favorite bits, because the idea here is that the Eternity Devil, I don't think they know its identity at the outset, but this devil they've come to hunt has a piece of the gun devil, so they figure, you know, 2 birds with 1 stone, kill the devil, get another piece of the gun devil. That will give us one less thing to worry about on the home front, and a slight advantage at tracking down the gun devil later on. Man, you know, it's nice that Aki's sort of figured out how to deal with Denji in power. It turns out they're very food motivated, although chewing gum's not exactly food. It's interesting that Denji and Power still aren't being treated as anything other than, like, potential traitors. I guess it makes sense with Power, but I feel like Denji's sort of been roped up into that whole Bat Devil business, and it's reflecting poorly on him. But I don't know, it's kind of unfair. Like, I guess I understand Aki's perspective, if they do anything untoward, then they get killed along with any other devils. So it seems like Power's reward for killing the Bat Devil is sort of the order of the day here. Himeno, who is, I believe, like Aki's sort of partner and or senior, she's offering a kiss on the cheek, and, I guess that sort of pales in comparison to what Power was offering. But, I'm noticing a bit of a pattern here. It is interesting, however, that this reward isn't really tempting Denji, Like, what's the saying? You don't want to go out for a hamburger when you've got steak waiting for you at home? I feel like Denji's just kind of putting up a tough front. He's saying, like, I don't care about getting kissed by you, but, if she pushes it a little bit, he really doesn't have the self-control to maintain that attitude. So it seems like that whole kiss on the cheek business has caused some controversy. Obviously, Denji, like, he wasn't initially too keen on the prize, but if it's up for grabs, why not? I feel like, maybe like a little HR representative wouldn't be amiss, just to sort of like snap these people back into line, considering how they treat each other. I mean, I guess it can't be helped, given that these guys are essentially like the experimental division, which is just a really nice way of saying we have all the weird misfits. Alright, so the real question is, in my mind, is the Eternity Devil going to show up this episode, or is he going to sort of be like a cliffhanger? Thinking about it, my money's on him being a cliffhanger. Especially considering how we're sort of taking a whole lot of time to learn about all these different characters. This is sort of like the introduction of Aki to Himeno. And it would seem as though the reason they got paired together is because Himeno's previous partner bought the farm. It is interesting how there doesn't seem to be any love lost between Himeno and her previous partners, but I feel like that's more a defense mechanism than anything else. It's like, they all died because they were useless, so they kinda deserved it. I guess that's better for your health to think like that than to think, all these good people died, and I probably could have done more to help them. Oh boy, here we go. It's the star of the show, the Eternity Devil. Isn't he just an evocative figure? Fortunately, he's just like a little guy. He can't really do much. At least, not in his current form. I do find it interesting that Kobeni here was, not really prepared to handle any of this. She sort of flinched at it and scurried away when it fell down dead. So that's interesting. It seems that devil wasn't the one that has the piece of the gun devil, so, despite killing a devil, they just have to keep going. So now we have this grand tradition of everybody sort of picking on Kobeni a little bit. And to be fair, she makes herself a pretty easy target by being, meek and easy to get a rise out of. And I feel like Pao is just kind of being a jerk. But at the same time, I doubt she can really help herself when there's such a tempting target that's easy to bully. So it seems like things are already getting a little interesting. This guy's already saying it right now, but attentive viewers will have noticed that a couple scenes ago, it was clear that they were on the 8th floor, and now they're back on the 8th floor again. So it would seem as though no matter what they do, whether they walk up the stairs or down the stairs, they just sort of come right back down to the 8th floor. Yeah, this is definitely not a good predicament to be in. Surely it must be the work of an enemy stand. Alright, well that's it for this episode. If you've enjoyed it, then by all means, tune in for the next one. See you, Space Cowboy.